Every organization has a culture. If you want a more powerful company culture, you are in the right place. That's our topic today. Are you ready? Let's get started.
Welcome to the Remarkable Leadership Podcast. We are here each week to talk about leadership, teamwork, organizational culture, and human potential with experts from every walk of life. Your host is Kevin Eikenberry, a best-selling author and leadership thought leader for 25 years. This episode is sponsored by Kevin's book, The Long Distance Leader: Rules for Remarkable Remote Leadership. Order your copy today at remarkablepodcast.com/book. And now, here's your host, Kevin.
Hey, everybody, and welcome to this week's episode of the Remarkable Leadership Podcast. We're here with our guest, Chris Dyer. We're going to dive in and talk with Chris, but first, let me tell you just a little bit about him. He is a recognized performance expert. He's the founder and CEO of People G2, a background check company that has appeared on the Inc. 5000 of fastest growing privately held companies. He is a speaker, consultant, podcaster, hosting the Talent Talk podcast, where he interviews top executives about their strategies for hiring and promoting talent. So now, along with our show, you need to get Talent Talk on your podcast list. And he also is the author of the new book, The Power of Company Culture. We're going to talk about that and a lot more. Chris, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having me. I love being on the other end of this podcast dynamic, being the guest instead of the host. So it's always fun to come in and have someone else grill me, right?
Well, it's interesting because this week I will have done 3 on this side of the mic and 2 on the other side of the mic. And so, yeah, you're right. It's interesting to play in sort of both roles. So I didn't do a lot in the introduction on purpose, really, because I wanted to give you a chance to talk a little bit about your story, your background, sort of how did you get to where you are? Tell us a little bit about your journey, Chris.
Yeah. I guess my journey really comes from me just being curious. And, I remember feeling guilty, like being 6 and 7 years old, and no matter whose home I was in, I was upstairs looking in their drawers because I was just curious to what they had, what was going on, what do they keep in there, and what are they looking at, and what are they reading, and I wasn't trying to find anything that was bad or get anybody in trouble, but I was just curious, right?
There's a fine line there, Chris. There's a fine
line. When you start doing that in your 20s, it's a problem. But when you're 6 and 7, it's cute.
People looking in people's medicine chests and all that stuff.
Right. Wait, you're not supposed to open people's medicine cabinets when you're at a party? Oh, sorry.
When you're 6 or 7, go for it. Just don't start taking this stuff, Chris.
Oh, there you go. Good advice. But I just think being curious. And so as I got older, people that I admired, people that I thought were smart and rich and were living a life I thought I wanted to live, whether or not I've changed my mind on some of that or not, but just people that you were sort of in your gaze for a moment, very curious about and what made them tick. And what I came to find out as I got older and I owned a company, that there is these certain set of things that society or there's just these common things that we think are true, and come to find out that most of the successful people I met weren't doing any of those things. And in fact, it was their intentionalness to not do some of these things is what made them successful, and what really drove them to be different. And that was like mind blowing. And so I went from being what I thought was this, hey, I'm doing all the things and following all the rules, I'm to be successful, and I wasn't meeting my goals. I wasn't doing the things I wanted to do. And as I began studying these people and learning more, I started being more successful. And that really drove us into the recession of 2008, 2009. And, the heart attack hit, and we had a lot of time on our hands at the office to think about things, right? There wasn't a whole lot of orders coming in. Mm-hmm. And that was a moment for me to really dive in hard into culture, engagement. And I realized, again, that the things I was doing that I thought were right were wrong. I was treating my employees like a parent to a sibling or a coach to an athlete, and trying to inspire them with a slight iron fist, right? Do as I say or go do 20 push-ups.
Go.
Right. and a lot of rah, and I meant it, and it was, and it was okay, but that wasn't the best way to get people to do their best and for all of us to reach our goals. And so my sort of elaborate, deep study into that caused us to do really well. And then people started asking me how we were doing well when everyone else was failing. And then I started talking, and then someone decided to give me a podcast, and then someone asked me to write a book, and then here I am on your podcast.
Here you are on my podcast today. So, you said something in that conversation, Chris, that I want to highlight for everyone who's listening. And it's this idea that there are these things that we're all supposed to do that the most successful people aren't doing. And the reason is because if we do what everybody else does, we get what they got, right? And so it's sort of obvious when you stop and think about it that way, but most people don't come to the realization that you came to. And so I'm really glad that you shared that. We've also had a couple of guests recently where we've talked about best practices, and we've really talked about the fallacy of best practices. Like if you do what everyone else does, you're going to get their result. It may not be the best one for you in your culture, to use the term culture, but also it's going to get you what they got. It's not going to take you someplace beyond that. So it's kind of an interesting, it's interesting to me how, and I'm sure you have the same experience, that as you have a number of guests, some things start to tie together and hook together. And for those of you listening, I'm hoping that you see the same thing. So I appreciate that. So tell us specifically about People G2. How did you get in the background check business? And sort of tell us a little bit about like why you picked that and sort of what's the evolution of that specifically.
I was working at a hotel in Hollywood. One of my first kind of big jobs out of college. Thought I was making, a lot of money. I was making $35,000, and I was like on the top of the world. But I was driving 2.5 hours each way to my job because I lived, not that far away, but with LA traffic, it was pretty bad.
You lived where you could afford to live on $35,000, and it wasn't in Hollywood.
Well, I was still living in my parents' house at this point, right? And so it was amazing and experience and learned a lot, but man, that drive was killing me and the stress was killing me. And I kept getting promoted up because I was, took the responsibility and I ran with it. This is often something I tell people, just take the authority. You know what I mean? Don't ask permission. I just kept taking authority and just kept solving problems and fixing things and handling situations. And people just kept saying, well, Chris can handle that. And then I got farther up the line, right?
Yep.
Every once in a while they would call me in and say, I'm not sure you should be, handling, you should be, I literally at one point was like in the kitchen helping people. They were shorthanded one day and I'm in the kitchen chopping carrots and like, that's not something you have to do.
Yeah, exactly.
So, I learned there some good stuff, but the background check company at that time that was providing services for the hotel had an opening, and I heard about it, and it was right around the corner from my house. So I said, you know what? I'm going to go do that. And stopped driving, 5 hours in traffic every day. I suddenly had all this time in the world. I could go and walk the dogs and stop eating unhealthy. And the small problem was I hated my boss. The boss turned out to be the worst boss I ever had in my entire life. And I learned a lot on how not to manage people and how not to manage people and customers and things like that. So September 11th happened and I was there watching it live. I was there working like East Coast hours. And it was like someone had lifted a magic spell from me. It was like, when you watch the Disney cartoons and someone lifts the spell and all this magic happens, right? I literally felt that experience. And it was, what am I doing? Life is too short. Why am I putting up with this person and this job? I'm going to look back at this in 10 years or 20 years and be mad at myself. And so that was September 11th. And by November 1st, I had started the People G2. We were called Liberty Alliance early on, but same company. And so started it with, just over a month and had my first, client within a couple of days and never looked back.
Awesome. That's fantastic. Now you hinted at this a second ago. People say, Kevin, what is your podcast? I said, well, I have leadership experts and expert leaders. And I think of you, Chris, as both, because you are leading a successful company and you are, writing and speaking about some of the same things that matter to all leaders. So I want to spend a little bit more time on you as Chris, the leader, with the leader hat on. You said that you learned some things, in 08, 09 that helped you really catapult the business, what are a couple of the things that you would say that everyone listening might be able to take from you in terms of key lessons that you took from that process?
Yeah, so this gets back in a little bit about those things that successful people do that maybe everyone else doesn't. And so I remember being at might have been an Inc. event and listening to this guy speak and talking about all his research and everything. And went over and talked to him afterwards. And I said, based on what you're saying, are you saying that we should work on our weaknesses? And he said, absolutely. I mean, that's like the general consensus is you should work and get better at the things that you're weak at. And yet his book and his research, and then when I said, but do you do that? And he said, oh no, I don't do that. I said, do the most successful people you interview do that? Well, no, they don't do that. And it was like, he knew the right answer, but yet the society has been telling us for so long that we have to get better at what we're weak at. Now, I will put an asterisk and tell you that this works really, really well in every facet of my life, except in your marriage. You do sort of have to work in your really close relationships on the things that you're weak at. But in everything else, you should find other people to help you.
Well, right. Whenever you can, you get someone else to fill that gap, right? You can't do that. Right?
I mean, if like you want to die doing bookkeeping, then you should not be doing bookkeeping. If you're not a good writer, then hire a writer, a copywriter. Get someone to help you look great. There are so many, especially in this new gig economy, there's so many people out there that are experts at what they do to help you get better. And so that was the really big one for me, because I had been spending my whole life trying to get better and just hitting my head up against the wall with certain things. I can get slightly better. I'm never going to be good at certain things because that's just not how I was raised. It's not my certain gifts that I was born with. All this stuff.
Well, and the leverage point there, and this maybe is where you're headed next. So the leverage point there is that's not just true for us. That's true for everybody on our team, right? We need to help everyone leverage their strengths, right?
So I realized there was people in my organization that were doing things they were terrible at because they were trying to be helpful, because they were trying to fill a gap and keep their job or whatever. And we realigned people into what they were best at and most passionate about. And wow, did things change. The morale changed, our productivity changed, our profitability changed, everything changed by removing people's, there's the wall, please go run into it and then come back and tell me, how you feel.
And then do it again tomorrow.
And then do it after lunch, right? I mean, they just keep doing it all day long. And so there are sometimes things we all have to do, we don't like to do, and you get stuck, and that's there. The other thing that I would say it's super important for people is to go back and do some personality tests. TonyRobbins.com/DISC. He gives away a free DISC profile. You can go in there and get your DISC profile. That's like a $200 test. Go get it done.
You can go to ours as well, freediscassessment.com.
I didn't even know that. Well, there you go. You should go there. Forget Tony Robbins. Go here and get it done, because it's an amazing test. It tells you so many things about yourself. It tells you how to be more effective. And we actually have everyone in our company gets that done. They actually get it done before we hire them, and we share them our DISC assessments before they ever accept an offer. So they know who they're going to be managed by. They know that personality. They can see it, and they can opt in or opt out ahead of time. And it tells people how to be more effective in managing them and how to be more effective in handling, situations. And I think it's great. And I think it really points to where people need to go for their strengths. You can see if they're leaders. You can see if they're, more of a steady personality or whatever it may be. And then we compile that with like Strengths Finders, which is all strengths, right? You can go get that for, $20 or whatever. And I think you start with those two. I'm not a fan of Myers-Briggs. That's just a personal thing. But I think the other two are really, really consistent and good, and get people really aligned to, in a simple way, this is what I'm good at. You know what I mean? It's almost like the old school when you're back in high school, they give you those tests and tell you should be your three top jobs, a race car driver, a rock and roll guitarist, or an accountant, or whatever they would tell you. There's that kind of, at least you had some idea what you should be doing. So.
Yep. And again, there are lots of great assessments. And I think I think that you've identified an important piece of that, Chris, and that is there's a self-awareness part, but there's also how do we use it in our environment around us. And we're a big believer that it's more than just, oh, look at what I now know about myself. Although self-awareness is incredibly valuable, it's about how we can use that in the environment as a member of the team and communicating better with others, et cetera. So I think that's right on. So
one of my favorite things is to have two people who aren't getting along, to send them each other's disc profile and say, you need to read this before you guys have another conversation. And I would say 99% of the time, all of the conflict is removed. And within 3 months, they're suddenly working really, really well together. One of the classic examples is I had, someone in sales and someone in ops just button heads. And the person in sales would call the person in ops and be like, how's your family? How's it going? They were trying to develop a rapport. And you read the disc profile on the ops guy and he's like, I don't want chit chat. I don't want to tell me what you need and I'll help you. And then I got to get off the phone because I'm busy. And we can talk about the kids some other time. And he was trying to be nice, but he was doing the opposite of what that person wanted to be effective.
He wasn't meeting the need of the other person, right? He wasn't meeting. Right. So it's all about it. The interesting thing about these kind of assessments is they're often designed and even shared and even promoted as being about self-awareness, but it's about that reflecting it out to others that makes it the most valuable, in my personal opinion. To your point exactly. So you got this successful company going, and then you got people saying, but you're learning some stuff here that we want to know. And somehow that led to a book, and the book is titled The Power of Company Culture, How Any Business Can Build a Culture That Improves Productivity, Performance, and Profits, right? And so why did you, at the end of the day, write the book? Because it's not enough. Having done it multiple times, it's not enough for someone to say, you ought to write a book. That's not a good enough reason. In the end of the day, did you do that, Chris?
So when they came to me and asked me to write a book, I went, I can't write a book. This is stupid, I barely got through college with my girlfriend, now wife, helping me write my papers. I mean, it was just like, this is stupid. And then I started to think about it, and I said, though, I've been learning so many things that when I talk about these things, people resonate with them, right? I learned things by cornering experts and at conferences and buying them a drink at the bar and just asking as many questions as I could before they ran away, and reading books. And then with the radio show, I noticed some really big things. So my number one strength for Strengths Finders is ideation. And that basically means if you give me 1,000 good ideas or just 1,000 ideas, my natural ability is to pick out the one or two things that matter. I could say, we should focus on this one and this one. And I'm usually right that those are the better two things. And I can kind of see through all of the other minutia. So I was seeing through the radio show interviews, people saying very specific things, sometimes with different vocabulary, but they were saying the same things about what their organizations were doing. And the best organizations were really talking about this stuff. And so I thought, it'd be interesting to do a book and talk about these 7 things that I had started identifying for our company, in saying, listen, when I've talked to Southwest Airlines and I've talked to General Motors and I've talked to these people, and these 7 things are big on their list, they ought to be big for People G2, and we ought to really make sure we're really good at these if we ever want to get to their level, right? Because we've had success. We've not had Southwest Airlines or GM success, right? We're not a Fortune 100 company or on the NASDAQ or whatever,
sure,
when you use to evaluate us. But, as a privately owned company, we've done well. So those types of things we thought would be interesting. So I decided to write a book and put those things in there. And lo and behold, I had to do a lot of research to validate whether or not I was correct, and found out that I was. And then after I released the book, then I had hundreds of people telling me, oh, this person wrote about this and wrote about that. And it was amazing how much more volume of content I got, sort of validating, right, that these are big things that people should be thinking about.
Right. So, you write a book titled The Power of Company Culture, and culture seems to be one of those words you know, you and I have been around a while and in business for quite a long time, and words sort of bubble up and they're now the buzzwords. And it feels to me like culture is one of those now. So that is no disrespect to the book at all, but it does lead me to this question. How do you define it? How do you define company culture?
Yeah, I mean, I have a really fancy version in the book, but I mean,
yeah, but people they need to go buy the book and they can read the fancy
yeah.
version. Right now they're listening to you have a conversation.
Yeah.
So,
but to me, culture is the combination of what is expected from you by your leaders, right? And what is it, and how, and what is it that the employees actually do to get their job done, especially when nobody's looking, right? So it's that sort of, that energy.
It's not the policy manual?
No, it's not the policy manual. In fact, that's usually what's killing your culture. You know, it's not, and so culture can warp and slightly change. It's going to be a little bit different in operations than it is in customer service, than it is in your office in Topeka, and, you know, whatever that may be. But there is this overarching culture that is top down. And then you have the second layer, which is sort of like the you know, with the filling in the cake, right? Is how is the employees at large interpreting that and taking it and running with it, right? Good, bad, or otherwise, to talk to clients, to talk to each other, to deal with problems, to, you know, find new ways to create profit, whatever those things are that are important to your company.
Right. So, we obviously need people need to go buy the book. There's a lot of great stuff in the book, Chris, and I highly applaud you for the work, even if your wife had to help you write the papers. I don't know. But here's the question. You just mentioned that there's a top-down piece to this, but is all of culture just senior managers' jobs? Like, should everyone be reading this book, or is this just a certain few folks that should be worried about this?
If you have any impact on a team, if you manage anybody, if you are a senior leader, if you're in HR, I mean, there's probably just about everyone in this book. I think there's things in there that can help anybody. You might be at the bottom of the totem pole and say, I have no impact on what our culture is, but you can pick up things in the book that will help you weave through the culture, deal with cognitive biases, and help you maybe be more effective on a team, because we all impact different subgroups inside the company all day long, regardless of your title, regardless of what you do at the company. And so often even just participating in a group setting, right? You might be the brand new person, the newbie of all newbies on day one, and you're in a team meeting. And if you know some of these things, you can help impact a better result for that team by just knowing a few things.
Gotcha. So since the book has come out and you're having, I know the process, you end up having lots of conversations with people in all sorts of settings about some of the content in the book. What are you hearing out in the world, or what are you observing even with clients, where's the most pain that people are having around cultures in organizations? Have you identified one or two or three things that, like, these are consistent? I'm consistently seeing these as issues.
Right. So the number one issue that Gallup recently kind of really identified for that is a trigger for engagement is, do employees feel heard? And so one of the pillars in the book is listening. What is a good listener? What does it mean to be heard? And so if we can, as leaders or inside organizations, make sure employees feel heard, and that we are listening to our clients and their needs, that's usually a pretty big one.
Go ahead. No, please go ahead.
And the second one is transparency. So the best organizations have sometimes radical transparency inside their organizations. Everyone has a varying difference on how much transparency is good for them. But that concept of people know what the rules are, people know what the goals are, people know what's expected of them, people know which way, often the CEO has set the ship in one direction, and yet we've got a whole bunch of people under below the ship with blindfolds on that don't know where we're going, and yet we expect them to row the correct way.
Yeah.
Right. And so transparency is another one that if you just work on that a little bit, it is huge in the organization and the impact it can have.
I can tell you that in our organization that, I think that my team would say that there's a high level of transparency, and yet we were working on something just a couple weeks ago where, I think where we pushed that boundary a little bit further. It was very powerful for us. It wasn't that there was anything consciously that I was necessarily holding back, but there were some great questions asked that sort of led us to another level of conversation that I think, to your point, is going to make a difference for us. I think it'll be one of those moments we'll look back and say that day, that conversation, that meeting will have made a positive difference for us as an organization. So, and it can be scary. I mean, if I'm now not talking to you, because but it can be scary. But it's doable. You gotta decide, and you gotta recognize the value of it. And I think they're connected. I think your transparency piece and your listening piece are absolutely connected. It's one of the things that I see when I was looking at the book, that I see the connection between those two.
I often have people, I'll ask them, I said, have you ever done recently any initiatives to try to save money? And they go, oh yeah, we just did a big one, a couple months ago. And I go, cool. How did that go? Well, we tried, we've got a few things. And I said, did you guys share your P&L? Do people know what you're spending money on? Well, no, that only, certain people see that. I mean, so my company.
How can you even ask people to figure out that stuff if they don't even know what we're spending money on?
So all they did was just randomly go back to a bunch of random vendors and say, give us a discount, right? And not knowing what the impact was. And they may have gone back to some of their best vendors and ended up getting lower service, and they got the price lower, but they got getting a lower amount of service. So you go back, you look at your P&L, and you be like, geez, our number one, some of our big areas of where we're spending money are here, and someone has this great idea how we can save money, knows a better vendor, whatever the thing is. When we started sharing that information, it was, I just did it to be more transparent. I didn't realize how much it was going to help us with saving money because they started thinking about things that I never thought of and asking questions that I just stopped asking because I forgot we were even spending money on this thing,
It's amazing. You don't have to be a Fortune 20 company to not know what you're spending your money on. Like, it doesn't, you and I are in the same place in that, like, my gosh. And we go back to, you don't see it because you're not dealing with it. Those folks are, and they say, oh my gosh, we shouldn't be spending that much money, or, we ought to be investing more there. Right. Based on the situation. So I think that's awesome. We're going to shift gears in a second, but is there any other final thing that you want to say about culture to the folks listening before we go on?
Yeah, the other one that I think can make a huge impact for companies is this idea of positivity. So positive leadership has really come a long ways. There's a appreciative inquiry, which is sort of on the psychology and then neuroscience and neuroleadership over here. And what I have found is they're actually finally have come together and are hugging.
Yes, they are.
And they're talking about the same things now, and there is scientific proof around these two things, and they use different vocabulary, but it's the same thing. And so for us, the appreciative inquiry is more touchy-feely, and we like that. That's our access point. I have a few people that would rather talk about the neuro part. You start talking about the amygdalas and the dopamine and all that, and most of my people go, I'm done with science class,
Yeah.
And so we do the appreciative inquiry part, but just changing your language slightly in your company by using that, by just studying that a little bit. For us, I mean, it has completely reduced conflict. It has helped us be better about how we are talking about things with our clients. One of the best examples I've ever heard is, so often if a client calls up and they're upset, in a traditional mindset, we think about how can I get the client back to the status quo? How can I get them back to where they were before they were pissed off at me in my company? The appreciative inquiry outlook is you talk to that client and say, what would it look like if we were doing our best job for you? If we were servicing you, if we were helping you at the way in which you would be like, this is the best thing in my life. What does that look like? And that's dreaming. Have them dreaming of thinking about how it could be. And so what you end up doing is they tell you this information most of the time, and you pass the status quo and you go over to an even better situation because
you could have imagined. And sometimes it's things that you can do easily. You just didn't even realize that's what they would want.
Right. I've literally had clients say, if I could just get a report once a month that told me this stuff, and I go, you don't know we had that report already?
Yeah. Let me send that to you, right?
Here's where it is. You can get it anytime you want, and we do send it out every month. And I didn't realize, and like that, they're now the happiest campers of all. Usually nothing have to change. So it's amazing that if somebody wants something really concrete, they really want to make a change. I suggest that. Self-serving. My book. So my book is a really good collection of other people's stuff. Right. I'm not a researcher. I'm not a scientist. I didn't create some 12-step process to make I have regurgitated, I am your Cliff Notes, right? I've read all the books and talked to all the experts, and I've regurgitated it in a way, and I think that is accessible for people to very quickly determine what will allow them to change their company and get better. And if you find an area where you're not doing well and you really want to go after it, there's a million suggestions in the book and ideas and books and studies, and you call me and places to go to really explore it, right? So you can read 100 books by reading my one little book, and get where you need to get as your launching point.
Hey everybody, there's the best sales pitch of the day. The book is called The Power of Company Culture by Chris Dyer. Now, the next short section of the program is what we call the fast break, Chris. And this is sponsored by our new book, The Long Distance Leader, Rules for Remarkable Remote Leadership. And if you are leading a remote team, you can go to longdistanceleaderbook.com and learn all about that. Now, what I have for you are it's 4 words, but it's 3 ideas. And I'm going to say the idea. I want your first reactions to it. It can be a single word. It can be a short statement, but just what would you say about that? Are you ready? I think one of them is a softball, and maybe the other 2 aren't so much.
Okay.
The first one is accountability.
Measurement. You can't have accountability if you're not measuring things properly.
Okay. Second one, talent management.
Talent management. I would say superior leadership.
Okay, excellent. And the last one is innovation.
Innovation. That is tough. What do I think? I think about innovation is a much longer answer. I think about, it's a very intentional thing you have to do, and it's really hard to do it right. Most companies take their innovation and they actually move it outside of the company, and they pull it away because people are incentivized to keep doing what you're doing, right? You're paying them to do a job and to keep the hamster wheel going, and that doesn't always going to help you be innovative. So you have to be really intentional. There's a lot of great books about innovation. The Innovator's Dilemma is another great one you might check out. That you can't expect your rank and file employees who you've paid to do a job to suddenly come to you and say, I don't think this is going to last another 5 years, right? They're just going to keep going the way they're going because you're paying them to do a job. It's head down. It's not their fault. It literally incentivize them to continue not to be innovative.
Yeah, you want them to optimize the thing that is suddenly becoming obsolete, right? So
it takes a real intentional process, and you have to. I think this is where leadership really brings its value to organizations, to be thinking about these things and to be intentional about their innovation.
So thank you for that. See, and they didn't have to be it didn't have to be a 1-word answer. It was perfect. Your answers, you completed the fast break perfectly, Chris. So when you're not writing and leading and building your business and talking with other folks and doing podcasts and being on podcasts, what do you do for fun?
For fun, well, a couple things. I'm in a band. I play guitar and bass, and kind of an indie project that we work on. It's for fun. I've done that for a couple different bands for a few years. And then probably my biggest passion outside of work and music is travel. So I love to travel. If someone asks me to speak in some obscure part of the world, I'm probably going to say yes. I was just in Guatemala. It's in Japan. I'm speaking in Amsterdam here in November. So, I love to travel, I love speaking, I love eating new foods and finding new beer to drink and, having a good time. So.
you were in Guatemala with my co-author, Wayne Trammell. I do believe.
Yes, that's right. That's where Wayne and I met. You're absolutely right.
That's sort of how we got connected. So that's exactly right. Did you get out before the volcano issue?
No.
Stuck there longer.
Yeah, I was stuck there a little bit longer. I had intentionally stayed a few days after the conference to enjoy Guatemala. And so I had a little bit of a buffer, but then my plane, when it landed, sucked up some of that volcanic ash, and the plane was grounded. And so we had to wait a whole nother day to leave. So I was impacted, sort of subtly by the volcano, but it was fascinating at the conference because when the volcano had been going off. Now, first of all, we woke up in the morning, we could see the lava flowing out of this volcano. It was in the distance, we could see it. We're going, wow, this is awesome. And then 2 hours later, it's, people are dying.
Not so awesome.
It's not. We are just jerks. We are the worst tourists ever. I mean, just not even thinking that people would be living on the side of an active volcano.
Right.
And then 2 hours after that, as we're sitting in the conference, everyone's phone, beep, 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 just crazy. I'm like, what horrible thing has happened in the world, right? And it was just everyone's airlines had canceled everyone's flights. They just across the board, everyone got their flights canceled. And then they slowly came back online. But I'd never had that happen to me before, but it was a fun experience. My friends are saying they may never travel with me again because we were in Guatemala with the volcano. I was in Japan when we had a 7.0 earthquake, and there was floods when I was there. And so they're getting a little bit worried about traveling with me.
So you just travel on your own. There you go. So two more questions, Chris. One of them is, what are you reading these days, or what's something you've read recently? I know that you did a lot of reading in relationship to the book. What's something maybe that folks might want to know about, or you might want to recommend to others?
So before I answer your question, I am going to throw out this little bit, something I discovered a long time ago. So I always wanted to read books. And I used to have a stack of good books that people suggested or I got at conferences on my nightstand. And the only thing they did was hold my drink, my glass of water at night or my glasses or whatever. And so I figured out that if I started a book club and I had to show up once a month and facilitate this group, I would read the book out of just pure peer pressure, right? And this obligation to feel like I couldn't show up and not have read the book.
Whatever it takes, Chris, whatever it takes.
Right. This is like a Tim Ferriss, kind of a hack, right? Kind of a mind hack. So I know I feel responsible to lead a group, so I will do the work. Started that a few years ago, and every month I have read at least one book, if not two, since then. Going from never reading a book unless I absolutely had to, I read some stuff for pleasure, but the businessy books, right? And also switching to Audible really helped me I have far more time in my life in transit and going places to be able to listen than I do to read.
Right.
And I always have it with you. So if anyone's having trouble, they have a long list of good books. Find a way to hack yourself.
Listen, if people are watching this podcast, listening or watching this podcast, they've got that list because I ask everybody this question, right? So
right.
Got a list. So go ahead.
So I just read. We just read Principles, Life and Work by Ray Dalio, and really good. In fact, he does talk about in the book about focusing on your strengths and outsourcing your weaknesses. The first person I read, I think, ever that really crystallized that concept that we talked about earlier. And it's a little difficult to listen to. He's, section 1 and then subsection A. He's very organized, and so listening was a little bit.
And it's not short.
It's not a short book, but it's really good. In fact, if you want to buy, you could even just download his principles from his website for free. You could start there. And if that interests you, to read the book. The other one that we just started for the book club is called Sapiens. And I haven't read it. I don't know if it's any good yet or not, but I have lots of people who've been telling me it's an awesome book. With the book club, we usually have 2 or 3, maybe 4 that are a little self-helpy at some level. And so every once in a while, we like to read something else that's maybe interesting that we can apply to our lives that isn't so, self-helpy. If you need self-help, and especially if you're a millennial, I think this book is really focused on millennial dialogue conversation, although it's good for anyone. It's just basically Buddhism and like good advice repackaged for for a young person. But it's a great book. It's The Subtle Art of Not Giving a Fuck, and I highly suggest that book. It really is a jam-packed with, again, taking really good core ideas and putting them back into a new lens. And if you need a little kickstart in your life, that's a good one.
There you go. So you got 3, everybody. And so now, Chris, the last question.
Your book at the airport too, which is a really good one. And the remote leader, I think anyone should check that one out, right?
That's right. Walking through the airport, you should see it. The long distance leader, right there for everybody to see. Last question, the one you most want me to ask: how can we learn more about your work, about the organization, about the book, etc.? Give people the coordinates.
So, check me out on LinkedIn if you want to connect. I'm always taking accept requests with rare exception. You can go to my website, Chris P like Patrick. Now you all know my middle name, Dyer, D-Y-E-R. You want background checks and drug testing, peopleg2.com. Happy to help you there. I'm on Twitter and all the other social channels. Or if you don't care, that's okay. But if I can help you out, let me know.
All right, awesome. And the book is called The Power of Company Culture. So my question now for all of you listening before we sign off is, now what? What action are you going to take from having listened to us? You got a lot of great ideas from Chris. You could have just listened to the last 5 minutes and his idea about how to get more reading done. I get asked that question all of the time. So you got some great ideas there. We can go back throughout the entire episode. Lots of great actionable things, all of which only matter if you do something. So please think about that and then go take some action, because if you do that, this will have been of much greater value for you. So Chris, thanks so much for being here. It was a pleasure to have you.
Thank you so much for having me. Appreciate it.
It was great to have you. And hey, everybody, if you enjoyed this, there's a whole bunch of these we've already done and a new one every single week. We're right here on the Remarkable Leadership Podcast, and I'll see you next week.